I never thought that a night shift cashier job at a massive retail store could turn into such a terrifying nightmare. My life, Evelyn at 28, was inherently a daunting cycle of monotony. Receipts, takeout food, and long shifts under the fluorescent lights at the Walmart in suburban Riverton. The job wasn't complicated, but it was steady, allowing me to afford a quiet little apartment about 20 minutes away by car. The loneliness of the night shift at Walmart is a peculiar feeling. Around 10 p.m., the families are gone, leaving only late-night bargain hunters, third-shift workers, or aimless wanderers. Everything was so repetitive that I could predict exactly when the manager would check the coffee, or when the delivery truck would arrive. About 3 weeks ago, I started noticing a regular. He wasn't shopping. He was the man in aisle 12. Aisle 12 was the home goods section lined with hundreds of irons and blenders. It was a secluded corner, slightly darker than the others. This man appeared almost every Tuesday and Thursday night. He was tall, thin, late 30s, always wearing a plain black jacket despite the warming Riverton weather. He never carried a basket or examined the merchandise. He just stood there motionless among the shelves and watched. I initially told myself it was just a coincidence. Perhaps he was a late shift maintenance worker or a customer waiting for someone. But his gaze wasn't that of someone waiting or lost. It was the gaze of observation. A glance from afar might be random, but repeated stares from the same corner are not. The real fear begins when you realize someone has watched you long enough to become part of the scenery. One Thursday night around 11:30 p.m., I had just finished my shift and was cleaning my area. I instinctively glanced at aisle 12. He was still there. But this time, as I turned away, I caught a reflection. He was holding a cell phone. I couldn't see clearly, but it was aimed right at me. A cold shiver ran down my spine like someone had poured a bucket of ice water over me. I thought of the photos being taken, the mundane moments recorded without my knowledge. He wasn't just observing me, he was documenting me. I quickly gathered my things, locked the register, and left. I didn't look back, but the sensation of his cold, unwavering gaze burned into my back. The incident could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. I had confirmed the worst. I started changing my routine at work, moving to Register 1 closer to the management office. But the following Tuesday, a coworker leaned over and whispered, "Evelyn, did you see that guy in aisle 12? He's been staring at your old register number 4 the whole time. That guy is creepy." I didn't need to turn around to confirm it. He was still there in the same spot, waiting for me to return to my routine. I lived in constant tension over the next few shifts. Every time I reached for the scanner, I imagined him adjusting his phone's angle. That evening, walking down the employee hallway toward the break room, I nearly bumped into a man coming out of the maintenance area. It was him. He wasn't wearing the black jacket. He had on a gray t-shirt and his black hair was slightly damp. He didn't meet my eyes, gliding past me as if I were invisible. But as he passed, I caught the familiar scent of cheap laundry detergent and old cigarette smoke. Then he stopped, not turning around, not calling my name. He just paused, tilted his head slightly and spoke softly, his voice low and hoarse as if unused. "Blue suits you." I was wearing a thin, dark blue sweater, something I only pulled out on colder days. There was no one else in the hallway. I froze. The horror wasn't that he spoke, but that he knew. He had observed me closely enough to remember the color of my clothes. These personal details, held by a total stranger, created a feeling of deep violation, far worse than any direct threat. I forced myself to walk away without looking back. He wasn't just watching me from afar. He had entered my personal space. The feeling of realizing the stranger had charted the details of my life was terrifying. I decided I had to act. I couldn't call the police. All he had done was stand in aisle 12 and compliment my sweater. I had to create the confrontation myself, but must maintain distance. That night, I clocked out at 11 p.m. I walked to the parking lot trying to appear normal. The lot was deserted, lit only by flickering yellow lamps casting light on the cracked pavement. I didn't see any car matching the man in aisle 12. I quickly reached my Civic, got in, and locked the doors immediately. I hit the gas and drove out of the lot. Once on the main road, I turned left, heading towards the freeway, my usual route home. About 5 minutes into the drive, I stopped at a red light. I checked my rearview mirror out of habit. The car behind me was an old silver sedan with dim headlights. A shiver went through me. That car had appeared right after I left the parking lot. Riverton wasn't huge, but a silver sedan shadowing my every turn was unusual. When the light turned green, I accelerated, increasing my speed. The silver sedan accelerated too. I switched to the right lane. It switched too. It was no longer a coincidence. Adrenaline surged. There was no doubt. He had monitored my schedule and was now following me home. "Damn it," I whispered. I turned onto Highway 99, the dark freeway connecting Riverton to my suburbs. I pushed the speed to 75 over the limit. The silver sedan clung to my bumper, maintaining a patient distance. I could see his headlights in the rearview mirror like a pair of cold, constant eyes. Remembering the advice, if you're being followed, don't go home, I abruptly switched to the left lane and took the very next exit, a street leading into the old industrial park, dominated by large warehouses and faint security lighting. He followed. As we drove deeper into the industrial zone, there were no streetlights or other vehicles. Only me, him, and the thick night. I navigated the Civic through a series of confusing turns, trying to use my familiarity with the area. But the silver sedan was an unbreakable shadow, weaving through dark alleys and empty loading docks to stay right behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew he wanted me scared. He wanted me to acknowledge his control. I suddenly swerved right into a dark alley between two warehouses. The Civic rattled as I sped through a puddle. I checked the rearview mirror. His headlights were gone. I slammed on the brakes. The silence after the roaring engine was deafening. I killed my headlights and listened. After about 10 seconds, I heard the squeal of tires. He had doubled back and was looking for me. The chase was over, but the silence was the most terrifying part. I couldn't stay there. I drove the opposite way down the alley, getting back onto the main road toward the residential area. I drove with my lights off for a few minutes, trying to melt into the darkness. I reached my neighborhood. This was where I needed to be most careful. I didn't want him to see where I lived. I parked about 3 blocks from my apartment, concealed by the shadow of a large oak tree. I pulled out my phone and called 911, explaining the man who was following me with a trembling voice. "Ma'am, we will dispatch a patrol car to that area immediately. Please lock your doors and stay put." 10 minutes passed, the longest 10 minutes of my life. I constantly scanned my surroundings. Suddenly, the silver sedan appeared from the corner of Pine Street. He was driving slowly, systematically checking every street. I ducked down beneath the passenger seat. I didn't want him to see me. Didn't want him to know I had escaped. The silver sedan crept past my Civic mere feet away. I could feel the weight of his searching gaze from inside that car. Then he stopped at the end of the street. His lights went off. He just sat there silent. I realized that even with the police coming, I had to move. I couldn't sit in the car all night. I waited for the flashing lights, urging them to hurry. The silver sedan remained motionless. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get inside. Opening the car door as silently as possible, I slid out. I sprinted across the dew-soaked lawn, heading toward my apartment. I ran without looking back, adrenaline pumping through my veins. As I neared the building, I heard an engine starting up. I didn't need to look to know what was happening. He had been waiting. He had given me a false sense of security. I burst through the building entrance, the heavy glass door slamming shut behind me. I flew up the stairs, 3 steps at a time, until I reached the door of my second-floor apartment. My hands shook as I fumbled the key into the lock. The moment the door opened, I dove inside and twisted the key twice, engaging the deadbolt. Downstairs, I heard a loud impact. The glass door on the ground floor. The police hadn't arrived yet. He was inside. I rushed into the bedroom, locked the door, and dialed 911 again. "He's in my building, please." I heard heavy, deliberate footsteps ascending the stairs. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. "Evelyn," his voice called out, low, deep, and unnervingly calm. "You know what I need." I held my breath, phone pressed to my ear. I heard the doorknob turn, gentle, patient. I knew he wouldn't kick the door down. He wanted me to open it myself. He wanted me to be terrified. Sirens wailed. Red and blue lights flashed across my window frame. His voice broke off. I heard a loud crash as if he had spun away and hit the wall. Then silence. 5 minutes later, the police knocked on my bedroom door. He was gone. They found a pried-open window downstairs, and the silver sedan had been abandoned 3 blocks away, exactly where he had stopped to wait for me. In his jacket pocket, the police found an old note, detailing a crudely drawn map of the Walmart parking lot. With a small dot, drawn in red ink, placed precisely at my register. Number 4. I moved out 2 weeks later. I never returned to Walmart. It was over, but the fear never faded. Now every time I drive, I check my rearview mirror obsessively. I know he was just an ordinary stranger in a black jacket, not a supernatural monster. And that is the ultimate horror. Monsters don't need extraordinary powers to destroy your life. They only need patience and an observant eye, long enough to know when you are alone. I survived, but I will never be free of the recurring gaze from aisle 12. My name is Leo Sterling, and I had spent almost 5 years working in the security office of Walmart. It wasn't a dream job, but it was stable and the nights were quiet. Wilmot, Pennsylvania, where I lived, was a suburb where people always assumed nothing ever happened. I liked that quiet. My job mostly involved checking for door faults, making sure cargo pallets weren't blocking fire exits, and staring at a matrix of split screens. It was repetitive, safe work until the night everything changed. It was 2:17 in the morning. Outside, the vast parking lot held only a sparse few idling delivery trucks. The entire store, the size of 3 football fields, was shrouded in deep shadow, broken only by green emergency lights and dim maintenance lamps that made the towering shelves look like rows of abandoned buildings. I sat in my small room on the mezzanine, breathing in stale, air-conditioned air that smelled of dust and old coffee. My eyes scanned the monitors. Camera 12, home goods, quiet. Camera 4, produce, clean. Camera 7, electronics. I paused. There was movement. Initially, I thought it was a shifting shadow or a reflection. The area was darker than usual, because someone had unplugged the aisle maintenance light the afternoon before. But as I strained my eyes, the image sharpened. A low, hunched figure moving slowly between the shelves of TVs and video games. Damn it, I muttered. Usually it was a lazy night shift worker cutting corners, but this section had been checked 3 hours ago. This was a break-in. I quickly grabbed the mouse and zoomed in on camera 7. The resolution was poor, but enough to make out a man. He wore a cap, a dark hoodie, and loose jeans. He wasn't carrying a shopping cart or a basket. He was carefully inspecting something on the shelves. I instantly reached for the desk phone, my hand trembling as I dialed the night manager, Tom. But before Tom could answer, the figure straightened up. He wasn't looking at the items he was inspecting. He was staring directly into camera 7. It wasn't the startled look of a surprised thief. He stood still, unmoving, with an unreadable, frozen gaze. Even through the low resolution, I could feel that stare, as if he was looking straight through the lens, through the wall, and right into the room where I sat. I set the phone down. My heart hammered hard enough to drown out the sound of the AC unit. Tom wasn't going to pick up the internal line now. I immediately switched to emergency protocol, locking the automatic main doors, activating the alarm, but I hesitated. If I sounded the alarm, this guy might panic and flee, but he might also do something reckless. I needed the police. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed 911. My voice shook as I explained. Yes, we have a suspicious male inside the Walmart in Wilmot. Electronics section. Yes, I'm internal security. I'm here alone. I don't know how he got in, probably the receiving door. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, said officers were en route. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to wait. I returned to the monitors. He was gone from camera 7. I quickly scrolled through the channels. Camera 9, the candy aisle, nothing. Camera 15, toys, nothing. Then I found him. Camera 5, aisle 12, cleaning supplies. He was moving along the aisle, unhurried but with purpose. He was walking through a section already checked where there was nothing valuable to steal. He was heading toward the security office. My office was located at the end of the service corridor behind the chemical section. He knew that. I zoomed in on camera 5 to see him better. The intruder stopped, lifting his hand to touch the brim of his cap. It was like a mocking salute. In that moment, I understood he wasn't here for money. He wasn't a random burglar. He was the hunter. Somehow he knew the schedule. He knew my isolated position. Maybe he had been watching me before this. My hands were sweating. How long until the police arrived? 4 minutes. The man turned his back to camera 5, and then, a sickening event, camera 5 went black. Signal lost. He had found and disabled it. He was getting close. I knew I couldn't sit there and wait for the police. My office door wasn't secure. If he reached it, I'd be cornered. I locked the office door, grabbed my tactical flashlight and a pair of handcuffs. Useless. The cold steel door behind me felt like a cage slamming shut. I stepped out of the office's faint light and into the pitch-black service corridor. The sharp smell of strong bleach and old cardboard hit me. The corridor was narrow, flanked by doors leading to storage rooms and restrooms. I tried to walk silently, but my shoes still made faint sounds on the concrete floor. I needed to move toward the front of the store, where there were more potential exits. I turned into the chemical section. Dozens of towering shelves stood like skyscrapers, loaded with boxes of detergent and bottles of fabric softener. Here, the weak light of Walmart was even dimmer, casting long, distorted shadows. Suddenly, I heard a sound, footsteps, quick, decisive, but not too close. They echoed from the end of the service corridor. He was there. He knew I had left, and he was right behind me. I turned off the flashlight, holding my breath. Like a wolf, he didn't need to see me. He just needed to hear me. I began moving through the maze of shelves. I had to crawl low under conveyors, squeeze past unorganized merchandise pallets. The smell of dry grass from the pet section drifted by. I heard the footsteps quicken. He had entered the chemical aisle. He was walking along the main path. I looked back. The darkness swallowed everything. He couldn't see me, but he knew I was here. I moved faster, but couldn't run too quickly. I was trapped in a labyrinth designed for sales, not for escape. A loud crash. A stack of cat food boxes collapsed onto the aisle near me. He was creating noise intentionally, trying to pinpoint my location. I jumped over a temporary display barrier and hid in the toy section, between dozens of boxes of dolls and video games. I knew where the closest way out was, the employee break room door at the front near the main lobby. I crawled through the toy section, keeping my body low to the ground. No time to think, only instinct. I had to reach the break room. I heard the footsteps approaching again. Not running, but a cautious, calculated movement. I reached the inventory storage area, a narrow corridor located behind the pharmacy section. The lighting here was even worse. I squeezed into a tight gap between two high steel racks loaded with sealed supply boxes. The space was too cramped, and I knew if he saw me, I'd be stuck. I held my breath. He entered the corridor. Now I could hear his breathing, the friction of his clothes. He was less than 6 steps away from me. I heard a soft scrape. He was using his fingernail or something else to scrape against the cardboard box right next to me. He was checking the hiding spots. He knew this space was a last resort. I closed my eyes. The feeling of being watched was more intense than ever. He was incredibly close, listening to my heartbeat. After an eternally long moment of silence, the footsteps resumed, but they moved slowly away. He had turned back. I waited another minute, my body aching from holding the rigid position. When I was sure he was gone, I slowly edged out. But I had been fooled. When I looked ahead, the path was blocked. A forklift, which I was certain hadn't been there before, had been moved to completely barricade the corridor's only exit. He had circled back to the front of the store and intentionally trapped me. I couldn't go back. I couldn't go forward. Only one option remained, the warehouse emergency exit. I turned away from the barricade and quickly retreated toward the storage area. He would soon realize his mistake. I turned into a small service aisle, heading straight for the receiving door exit. I reached the steel door marked emergency exit only. I didn't have the key, but I had something better. Every security guard knew the internal latch on this door was poorly maintained. I slammed my hand onto the metal bar. It gave way. The door slammed open. Simultaneously, I heard a shout echoing from inside the store right behind me. He had realized I was here. I dashed outside, my feet hitting the cold ground hard, inhaling the cold October night air. I was in the back parking lot where large delivery trucks were idling. I ran between the trucks trying to find my own car. Headlights suddenly flashed directly into my face. A dark pickup truck was speeding straight toward me from the loading ramp area. He wasn't alone. I didn't have time to reach my car. I accelerated, running toward the low iron fence separating the parking lot from the woods behind. I jumped the fence, my clothing tearing as I caught on the wire. I landed on the soft ground. The truck stopped. I heard the car door open. I ran through the woods, aiming for the main road. Roots and dry branches stabbed at my feet. I knew this area. It led out to the main street on the west, where there was a residential area and certainly the police. I ran as hard as I could. I didn't dare look back, but I knew they were behind me. I heard a second set of footsteps, the sound of breaking branches quickly gaining. Finally, I saw the streetlights. I burst onto the main road, gasping for breath. And then I heard the sirens. 2 police cruisers, red and blue lights flashing, were approaching from the east. Instantly, all the noise behind me stopped. I turned around. 2 figures stood at the edge of the woods, swallowed by the shadow. They stood still, motionless. The pickup truck was parked in the lot, headlights off. As the police cars approached, shining their lights directly on them, the 2 figures quickly vanished into the deep woods. They didn't want to be caught. I collapsed on the side of the road, struggling to catch my breath. The police reached me. They began searching. Inside the store, they found evidence of the break-in, a broken window near the dumpster area, a wrench left near my office, and most importantly, they found all security cameras had been disabled or redirected. A few days later, the detective showed me a photo. His name was Marcus Hale. He wasn't a thief. He was an outlaw. The police believed he had been surveying commercial facilities for weeks, looking for an easy target. He knew I worked alone. He was there not for the money in the safe, but for something much worse. I was lucky. I survived. But even now, years later, every time I drive past a dark Walmart parking lot, I still feel eyes watching me. I know I barely escaped that night. I know that in the shadows of the empty aisles, it's not ghosts waiting. It's just monsters that are all too real. I didn't think I would be the person working this job at 33. It wasn't the career I ever envisioned for myself, a former medical student who dropped out due to financial pressure. But the Walmart on the corner of 11th and Hawthorne Avenue was where I made my living. My name is Alex. It was a damp Thursday evening, one of those November nights where the cold felt heavier than usual. Unlike the noisy downtown blocks, this commercial area usually went silent after 9 p.m., leaving only the yellowish glow from the storefront windows and the rare sound of a passing truck. I was the only one left, scheduled for the late shift to conduct inventory. At this hour, the only sounds breaking the silence were the whirring of the refrigerators in the yogurt aisle and the flickering hum of the fluorescent ceiling lights. I was attempting to reorganize the toilet paper shelf, a simple task that required a focus I struggled to maintain. I always tried to be careful, aware that I needed to protect myself and avoid dangerous situations. But as I bent down to retrieve a new carton, my eyes stopped on something that shouldn't have been there. In the middle of the rolls of white paper towels, taped onto the drywall behind the shelf, was a piece of silver duct tape. It wasn't the store's usual packaging tape. It was glossy, wide, and stretched horizontally. I peeled it off. Beneath it was a perfect rectangular cut in the wall, cleverly shielded by the shelf unit. My hands started to shake. I touched the cut with my fingertips. It wasn't an old crack or random damage. It was intentional. As much as I wanted to believe it was just some harmless mishap, a primal instinct within me, the one I usually use to double-check the locks before bed, screamed a warning. I pushed the toilet paper boxes aside and peered deeper into the small gap. What I saw wasn't wiring or plumbing. It was faded yellow insulation, and nestled right inside, hidden away like a secret I never wanted to know, was a short piece of PVC pipe, sealed carefully at both ends. It was not plumbing. It was a hiding place for something. I immediately backed away, my heart pounding so hard I thought I could hear it echoing in the empty aisle. I didn't call the police immediately. I had no evidence, just a cut on a wall and an empty plastic tube, I reasoned. I was afraid it was just a prank or some ridiculous story I had fabricated in my own mind. But the feeling of being watched, the cold sensation that someone was observing me through some unseen gap, didn't disappear. I walked through the aisles, trying to appear normal, continuing my inventory work. Every step was cautious, slow. I tried to rationalize every sound around me. The air conditioning unit, the light clinking of metal boxes on the shelves. At 11:30 p.m., I stood at the checkout counter. The store was empty, but I looked through the front window out into the parking lot. The large lot only held my old Corolla parked under a flickering light, and a black sedan parked 3 spaces away. It wasn't a car I had ever seen here. The person inside was sitting still, facing the building. I couldn't clearly see their face in the darkness, but they weren't using their phone, not moving. They were just sitting there watching. I retreated from the window, a wave of cold washing over my spine. I returned to the shelf where I had found the pipe. The urge to investigate was stronger than my fear. I used a small screwdriver to widen the cut in the wall. I pulled the pipe out. It was heavier than I expected. With trembling hands, I unscrewed the cap on one end. The dim light from the aisle fell inside, revealing the contents. A small, tightly rolled parchment scroll held by a rubber band. I unrolled the paper. It wasn't a map or a letter. It was a blueprint sketch, not a standard architectural drawing. It was the layout of the store, but marked with symbols I didn't understand. Squiggles, strangely shaded areas, and circled numbers around the back warehouse area, near the trash compactor. When I flipped it over, I noticed a small line of handwriting, almost invisible. Delivery Saturday 2 AM prep dumpster area. My throat constricted. This wasn't about Walmart. This was about someone using this store as a secret transit point. I wasn't an accidental witness. I was the only employee who had uncovered their plan. The black sedan outside wasn't waiting for a relative. It was waiting for me to make a mistake. I tossed the pipe and the scroll into the trash bin. I couldn't call 911 with a piece of paper and a cut in the wall. I needed to get out of here, but if I ran to my car, the sedan would spot me. I decided to hide. I needed to linger until my shift ended, or better yet, until they thought I had left. I turned off the lights in the main aisles, leaving only the emergency lights and the light from the office. The store plunged into murky darkness. I crept through the aisles, my mind spinning with fear and adrenaline. The area behind the store, housing the warehouse and the trash compactor, was the most marked area on the sketch. That must be where they were headed. I crawled into the children's toy aisle. The shelves here were high and stacked with cheap merchandise, forming a labyrinth of metal and plastic. I lay flat behind a tall stack of crayon boxes. I recalled the warning from real-life horror stories I'd heard. Silence is the predator's friend. I heard a sound. It wasn't the normal sound of the store. It was the automatic glass doors sliding open, followed by a deeper thud as the door closed. Someone was inside. I checked my phone. 1:45 a.m. They were 15 minutes ahead of schedule. I heard the heavy sound of boots walking on the tiled floor. Not one person. It sounded like several. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if they knew the store's layout by heart, or had meticulously studied that sketch. A deep, cold voice echoed from the front hallway. It wasn't loud, but in the silent space it was sharp as a blade. "Find Alex, he's the one on shift tonight. He didn't turn off the warehouse alarm." My stomach dropped. They knew my name. Perhaps my name was on the shift schedule, but the fact that they knew about the warehouse alarm, something only employees would know, indicated they weren't random robbers. The footsteps split, one group moving toward the front, another moving toward the back, right where I was hiding. I knew I couldn't stay put. Above me, I felt the footsteps approaching. I squeezed through the gardening aisle, where metal shovels and shears hung on hooks. I grabbed a small, heavy gardening trowel. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it offered a fragile sense of security. I moved into the frozen food aisle. This area was darker. I heard the sound of someone rummaging through things in the office up front. "Can't find him. Come here." A second set of footsteps entered my aisle. I pressed myself against the freezer units, the cold seeping through my shirt. I could make out the person's silhouette. Tall, wearing a dark hoodie, a baseball cap pulled low. He stopped right across the ice cream freezer from me. I held my breath. He reached out, touching a stack of toilet paper next to me. Then he suddenly shoved the entire shelf unit with both hands. The metal shelf crashed down, sending goods flying everywhere. He hadn't been looking for me. He was trying to force me into the open. I recoiled, backing into a stack of brooms and mops. He heard the noise. He stepped into my aisle, his pace quickening. I no longer had time to hide in the labyrinth. I ran toward the rear of the store, where the back exit door led to the compactor area, the same area they were heading toward. I dodged around unopened boxes, feeling as if every cheap item in the store was trying to trip me. I heard his pursuit. He didn't call my name or say anything, just the heavy sound of labored breathing and boots crushing things on the floor. As I neared the exit door, I saw two other figures standing there, one fumbling with the lock, the other carrying a large black bag. Like a duffel bag, I was trapped between three men. I paused, looking around. Above my head was the fragile drywall ceiling grid, where the pipes and cables ran. I thought of the only choice I had. I pulled the gardening trowel from my sleeve, gripping it tightly. I used all my strength and slammed it into the nearby soda vending machine. The thick glass shattered, creating a deafening noise. All three men flinched, turning toward the sound. The distraction lasted less than 2 seconds, but that was all I needed. I sprinted left toward the restroom entrance. I burst inside, locked the door with the bolt, and immediately climbed onto the toilet. I pushed hard against the ceiling grid. It shook, then gave way. I pulled myself up, the screams of my muscles drowned out by the fierce pounding on the wooden door beneath me. The space above was cold and cramped, filled with dust and cobwebs. I crawled along the ductwork, heading toward the front of the store where the light was brightest. Below me, the door was kicked down. Heavy footsteps searched the restroom. Where the hell is he? Look up! I crawled faster, trying not to make any sound. I could hear their voices right beneath me. He's in the vents. I crawled to the area above the office where there was a window overlooking the parking lot. I could clearly see the black sedan still parked there, and a security patrol car parked right next to it. I had sent a text message about suspicious activity to the security company's emergency number right after I found the pipe. I hadn't called the police, fearing they wouldn't believe me. I had called a third party to verify the strange car. I lay still, listening. The front door had opened. I heard a brief conversation. The security company wasn't the police, but they carried firearms. Everything is fine here, just doing night inventory. We received a tip about a black sedan parked here too long. I heard the sound of hurried footsteps running out of the store, not the heavy footsteps of when they entered. I waited for another 10 minutes. Then I slowly slid down from the ceiling, landing on the desk in the office. The black duffel bag I had seen earlier was gone, along with the 3 men. When the security guard entered to check, he found me standing in the office, my face smeared with dirt and sweat. I told him everything. The police arrived later. They found the cut in the wall, the boot prints on the floor, and a bent gardening trowel. They also found a black pickup truck abandoned in a nearby parking lot, containing ropes, duct tape, and a hunting knife. I quit Walmart shortly after that. I knew they wouldn't come back to that store, but I also knew they knew my name and they knew I had seen something. I work somewhere else now, but I still park my car under the brightest lights possible. Sometimes when I pass a Walmart, I catch a glimpse of the dim, flickering fluorescent light, and I remember the cold feeling as I crawled across the ceiling, realizing that to those people I wasn't a person, but merely an obstacle between them and their merchandise. I survived, but I learned a bitter lesson. The most realistic danger often comes from the most mundane places, and sometimes the ordinary things in a store can hide extraordinary threats.